Okay guys, so today I want to show you a few different ways that you can play around Droll in this deck. I'm going to show a few different Centurion combos because Centurion seems to be still the most popular version, maybe because people already have those cards. And then I will show some options without the Centurion cards. Now, just so you know, there is a Discord, so the link will be in the description below. And there you can post your deck list to get feedback, discuss what other people are playing, talk about tech choices. I'll also be organizing events. One of the things that I have planned coming up is a tournament using White Forest variants only. So if you're interested in any of that, you can join the Discord. And if you're not, then you could ignore that. Okay, so now we'll begin. This is not an unusual hand if you were playing a larger Centurion package. A lot of people play 3 stand-up and even 3 oath. So, don't think like, oh, he just drew the stand-up or the gargoyle, because this could have been oath. So these would all be 3 ofs in a version that is playing the larger Centurion package. So this is a pretty standard hand. So we set the toy soldier and we activate reset and we search the Esteller. Now, if you get Drolled here, you can't search off of the toy soldier, and you're not going to be able to get a search off of whatever Esteller brings out. So assume that we are now under Droll because we have searched the Esteller off of the LZ. Now we activate the stand-up. The stand-up sends the Esteller because there's no access to woes through the Esteller right now, and we're going to be able to get it back because we're going to send a spell or trap to the grave to activate a monster effect at some point. So now Trudea gives us access to the Primera, and because we're under Droll, this can't search anything if you had a search target, or if you're on the smaller engine, you wouldn't be searching anything anyhow, aside from a Gargoyle if you weren't under Droll. But again, this is interchangeable with Oath, so it doesn't matter. And we Gargoyle send the Trudea, which is important because we're using the stand-up as an interruption on their turn, whereas the Trudea isn't going to give us anything else. So now we go into the Auxilla, and again, we're under Droll, so if you had a search target, you can't search, and Legatia couldn't draw either, so it doesn't matter for our purposes if you're playing Legatia or Auxilla because you're under Droll. So now the Gargoyle adds itself back from the grave, and you go to end phase, which will place the Primera back. Now here we bring the Primera out and we chain the stand-up, and so we use the Primera and the toy soldier to go into diabell. We don't get an add back right now because we didn't use a Synchro tuner, but we didn't have anything to add back, so it doesn't matter. And now if we were to use the diabell to bring out the Silvera, sending the stand-up, that will actually trigger the Esteller. And so even though this isn't a phenomenal end board in terms of interactions, I wanted to show this combo first to just show that you actually can cycle through your engine and be bringing your resources back under Droll if you play in a way where you don't have access to woes. So there's no woes and you're still getting the Silvera. And if that makes you survive until the next turn, then you have a decent amount of monsters in rotation. Okay, so for the second combo, here we have a similar hand, and then I'm going to move on and start showing you different types of hands. But I want to show you another way with the Centurion cards. And again, like the easiest way to show this is with specific hands instead of just saying, oh, you should search this card first. So here we have started with both Esteller and Reset. And what is important to remember if you're trying to play around Droll is that part of this effect of resolving this card is that you are adding a card from the deck to your hand. So there is no path to searching woes if you resolve this. Whereas the Asteria, or the Esteller, doesn't add from deck to hand, it specials. So we are getting access to woes through Esteller instead of LZ because we think that they're going to Droll us. Okay, so now the Sylve resolves and we have added woes. So let's say that we get Drolled, and now we can't add from the deck to the hand anymore. So stand-up sends the LZ, which is dead because of Droll, but we will get access to this again. And we place the Trudea, which gives us access to the Primera. The Primera brings itself out. It can't search if we had a target. The Gargoyle, again, sends the Trudea and not the stand-up because we want to keep the stand-up as an interruption. Now we make Auxilla. We can't search if we had a target. Gargoyle adds itself back from the grave to the hand, and now we set the woes. So end phase, we will place the Primera, and now when the opponent goes to play, we have a spell engrave, we have LZ engrave and Trudea, and the Esteller is on field here. So there are different options for things that we could go into. You could argue that one thing that you can do is instead of placing the Primera, you could have placed the Trudea, and then, so if you read this card, this says, let's get to the relevant part. During the main phase, If this card is a continuous trap, you can special summon this card, then you can increase its level by 4. So if you were to bring the Trudea out as a level 8, you have a dark level 8 on field and a light level 2 here. And remember that Chaos Angel does not require a tuner. You can treat a light or dark monster you control as a tuner. So technically, you could have placed the Trudea instead of the Primera, and you can Synchro Summon into a Chaos Angel, which now makes all of your Synchro monsters unaffected by monster effects, and all of your monsters can't be destroyed by battle. So you could Chaos Angel before you even resolve the woes, if you wanted. But I am going to show that instead I'm going to be summoning the Arciela, which will trigger the LZ, because so this one is different. Remember, this is the one that says if a light spellcaster tuners is special summoned to your field, then you can add it from the grave to your hand during your opponent's turn, so you don't have to actually send a spell or trap for this one, whereas you do for a stellar. And so I want to show that with this card, with the Arciela, you can actually, so there are lots of things you can add. You could add a Veiler, you could add follow-up, although you already have an LZ that you got back, and that's important because there's less reason for follow-up, or like less pressure for follow-up if you have one of your starters. So you could add a Veiler, which is what most people do if you were to make this card. But what I want to show, and the reason for making this card right now, and like not going straight into Silvera or whatever, is that you can get a lot of value out of the Iris Sword Soul. So we haven't used woes yet. And we trigger a stellar, so the stellar comes back here, and now we activate woes and we bring out the Rafflesia. Now, here is something else that you should take into consideration if you're playing Iris Sword Soul. What I want to show is, if you block access to your tuners in the grave, you can't cycle through your Synchro material. So what I mean by that is right now, I can't summon Iris Sword Soul because, so this card says, during the main phase, if a monster whose effects are negated is on the field, quick effect, you can special summon this card from your hand. If your opponent special summons a monster, except during the damage step, you can activate one of these effects based on where it was special summoned from. So if your opponent special summons from the hand, you can special summon a monster from your hand. That's the irrelevant one, usually. If your opponent special summons from the deck, you can draw 2 cards. Now that is very helpful on a hand trap build, or if you're playing greedily. And then if your opponent special summons from the extra deck, you can destroy one of those monsters special summoned from the extra deck. So those second 2 effects are pretty relevant. And this is also a level 8, so like this bridges you into your Centurion engine and stuff like that. But what I want to show is, if you just go and make, like, you know, the diabell here, sure, you can add back a spell or trap, and the diabell can bring out the Silvera. But even though you've put your Arciela into the grave, if you have both of your tuners on field, then you can't shuffle the Arciela back to bring the tuner out, which would be negated, and therefore make you able to summon the Iris Sword Soul. So yeah, the point of showing this combo is that, like, it's not just as simple as what should I search first or whatever. It matters on what your hand is and how your play plays out, because, you know, if you knew that you would be stuck with these tuners, you probably shouldn't go for Iris, then maybe you should just search Veiler as an additional interruption. But I just wanted to show that you can search this card if you play around being able to summon it. Okay. So now we will go on to the third one. I only have 2 more. So here is if you draw toy cards and the White Forest cards. So we activate box. This doesn't search from deck to hand, so we're not locked right now. We activate a stellar and we bring out the Sylvie, and we don't use the Sylvie effect. Now, I'm not saying that you must do it this way. I'm just showing you different options based on your hand. So if we had searched off of the Sylve, or the Sylvie, we would have searched woes, and then we would have been under Droll. And at that point, then you just have to decide, like, you know, are you going to, like, climb into a Link monster or whatever other type of play. I'm also not going to search off of the Toy Soldier because I don't want to use my search yet because I'm thinking that the opponent has Droll. So instead, I turn the Sylvie and the Stellar into a Arciela, and here is where I search the woes. And I have been able to send the tank for that. So I search the woes and I trigger the tank, and so I'm under Droll at this point, so I can't add from the deck to my hand anymore. Now, one of the things that you can do, I'm going to show you with the Fiendsmith cards, but I'll also show you after this, if you are not playing the Fiendsmith cards, what you can do. So if you turn those 2 monsters into the Closed Heaven can then go into the Requiem. Requiem can bring out the Engraver. You can equip here, and now you can go into Necroquip Princess by contact fusing, and now the Engraver can bring itself back out from the grave. Now, obviously, if you have a second toy box, there's no reason not to use a toy box, so I'm just showing that with the hand, but this is irrelevant to the combo. And now here you can make a Wave High King Caesar. And so what you have here is under Droll, you still were able to make Wave High King Caesar, which is probably going to be strong in the upcoming meta. And you have a way with woes to go into diabell, and this will cycle you through your entire engine. So if the AI makes a play here, I can't remember if they do. Remember that whichever of the level 2 starters you have in your grave, you always woes to bring out the other one unless you're forced to bring out a tuner, because you want both in rotation. So if I woes to synchro into the diabell, the diabell adds me back a spell or trap. In this case, I'm just adding the woes back because that was the only target. And then here I can bring out my Sylvie, for example, and because of that, I can then add the LZ from my grave to my hand, because it just has to be a light spellcaster tuner. It doesn't actually have to be the synchro monster. And then the opponent doesn't, like, you know, activate a card for me to be able to respond with diabell or whatever, but that would trigger the Esteller, and there are like lots of different things you could do. You know, like diabell could send a soldier or a tank to bring out the Silvera, and then you can like choose if you want to bring back the Esteller or the soldier or the tank or whatever. So yeah, the Fiendsmith cards also help you very much under Droll. This is if you're accessing them under Closed Heaven, because there was a discussion in the Discord about this, and there was like, well, you know, you just activate Engraver, you get Droll, you lose, blah, blah, blah. But most of the time, that's not even how you're using the Fiendsmith cards. You're going into it off of Closed Heaven. Okay, so now for the last one, I will show another hand that is not using the Centurion cards. And so we don't have box, because obviously box is like the best possible draw if we have the toy engine. So again, we draw both starters. And again, you have to remember that if you're going to get drolled and you use the LZ, then you already used your search. So there's no way to access woes, but we would like access to woes. So instead, we're going to send the tank, we're going to bring out the Sylvie, and here we're also, oops, pause please. We're also not going to search off of the Sylvie, because we want to get access to a Rafflesia off of the LZ. So we turn the tank and the Sylvie into a Traptrix Rafflesia. Now, the thing about Traptrix Rafflesia, so let me go over this, is this says unaffected by trap effects while it has material. Traptrix monsters, blah, 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 that's not important. Quick effect. You can detach one material from this card and send one whole normal trap card that meets its activation conditions from your deck to the graveyard. This effect becomes that trap card's effect when that card is activated. So I'll show you the search targets for this afterwards, but this is accessing Gravedigger's Trap Hole. And Gravedigger's Trap Hole negates a monster effect that was activated in the hand or banishment, and then burns the opponent for 2,000. So now that we use the LZ and we search for the Rafflesia, if they were to chain Droll here, we would just respond with Rafflesia, and Gravedigger's Trap Hole would negate the Droll. So now they've used Droll, but we negated the Droll and we're not under the Droll. And we can special summon the Rafflesia because we control a White Forest monster. This can put us into Arciela, and now we search for the woes. And the cool thing about this play is if they don't have Droll, this card is still an interaction on your opponent's turn. So now you have the legend, but the Asteria or the Esteller is triggered. So that comes out and you synchro into the diabell. So that gives you an add back from your deck to your hand. And at this point now, because you have used the synchro material, a tuner, and that was in your grave, you can recycle it and put this back on the field. And now at this point, you don't have to use the Fiendsmith cards. You could just go into a Little Knight, for example, with the Rafflesia and the LZ. So those could just become a Little Knight. Or if you don't have a Little Knight, you could make a Tri-Edge Master just for another draw. That's probably the worst option that you could make, just because it gives you the least amount of advantage. But if you're on a budget, you know, you might as well get a draw. So like Stardust Charge Warrior or Tri-Edge Master, you could turn those into. Or you could leave them on field for materials for the woes to use as synchro. But I'm just showing, if you do have the Fiendsmith cards now, that you can do the Necroquip combo where these come out and you make Wave High King Caesar, and now you have the woes set again. So yeah, and if they didn't Droll, then you didn't use the Rafflesia, so the Rafflesia is still there as an option. So those are a couple different ways that you can play around Droll. with this deck. I will show you So here is one of the versions that I was playtesting for these combos. You don't have to copy exactly these cards that I have in here. What's more important is that there are about 12 power spells in the deck, 3 of which are thrust, which means you have access to woes and legend. And as I say in all of my videos, even if your opponent does not control a monster, if you need access to legend and you set it off of thrust, and then you send the legend to activate a monster effect and it resets itself, it is now a different card, and you can use legend the turn that it was set by thrust if you do that, or the card is now called Tails. So I'm also playing the smallest Fiendsmith engine, and because I've already gone over showing you the larger Fiendsmith package in the extra deck with Dies Irae and Lacrimosa, I'm now trying to show you other things that don't require as large of an extra deck so that you can play other cards like Traptrix Rafflesia with the Gravedigger's Trap Hole. So this is the card that can negate Droll. So when your opponent activates a monster effect in their hand or graveyard, or when your opponent's banished monster effect is activated, negate its effect, and if you do, inflict 2,000 damage to your opponent. So this is not just for Droll, actually, but also for Nibiru. So I guess, you know, like if you make this card because you're preemptively expecting the Droll, like you have to do this before you've been Drolled. The first 2 combos I showed you with Centurion, you can do them after you've been Drolled, but this one is for before. And so then you start your searches after you've already made the Rafflesia. And then if they don't Droll you, then, you know, maybe they also have the Nib, or maybe they have like a Veiler or some other card. So like this has quite a lot of coverage. And then obviously if they're trying to like trick you and they have like Droll and Veiler and they're waiting until you search or whatever and then they try to Veiler you later, then at least you get some value off of this card and you've like gotten a search around the Droll. This is also a very good card, Time Space Trap Hole. So when your opponent special summons a monsters from the hand or extra deck, shuffle that monsters into the deck and then you lose 1,000 life points for each return monster. Cool thing about this is that your opponent can't trigger effects from the deck. So like if they summon a Mirror Jade and you shuffle it back into the extra deck, they can't use the effect to blow up in the end phase. So this is probably one of the more impactful of the hole traps that you could play with Rafflesia. I don't think that you should be maining both of them because they're bricks going second. I'm just showing that this is an option if you're really concerned about Droll. And maybe also you're not playing the Centurion cards, and so you have a harder time playing around Droll, then you could consider, you know, just playing a single Gravedigger's Trap Hole in the main deck and a Rafflesia in the main as well. I think that is basically it for the video. I am still waiting to see what kind of format we're going into before I give more definitive builds of what I'm playing, but I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any feedback, leave it in the comments below or let me know in the Discord. Thanks for watching.